Hello, in this tutorial I would like to show you how to crochet in the round starting with a magic ring. This is the most common way to start amigurumi type projects. For example, in this Cthulhu I've made, we start the body with a magic ring, the ears, the arms, as well as the legs. You can also use a magic ring to start other types of crochet projects. For example, this square, the pattern also starts here in the middle with a magic ring. Now, in fact, there are many different ways of making the magic ring. In this tutorial, I would like to show you how to do two different ways. So, the first one is actually one of the most common for amigurumi projects. You start by taking the end of your yarn or your tail, and I like to pinch it here between my thumb and my pinky, and then I'm going to wrap it around these three fingers in an X shape. So my leading yarn is this way. And then I bring it around again and pinch it between my thumb and pinky as well. Then you can take your hook, insert it underneath the first strand of yarn, grab the second one, pull underneath, twist your hook so you get a little twist on here on the hook, and then grab your leading yarn again and pull through to make a chain. All right, so now we have our yarn tail, we have this large loop made, and then we also have our leading yarn. So to continue, you just set up your project the way you would normally crochet. So I wrap the leading yarn over my index finger and I hold the work between my thumb and my middle finger. Now, depending on the project, you might need to start on different amounts of starting stitches. For a round ball like this, normally you would start with 6 stitches. So this first chain does not count as a stitch. So to make your first stitch, you insert your hook into this big loop, grab your yarn and pull through, and now you have 2 loops on your hook. You grab your yarn again and pull through, and this is your first single crochet stitch. Now, very important, once again, make sure that you're working over your tail, because this is what we're going to use to close our magic ring in the end. All right, so we have 1, now we need to make 5 more. So the same, insert, go 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, now we're going to close the ring. So just pull up your yarn a little bit to make sure that you don't accidentally pull off a stitch. And we're going to close it by pulling on the tail, like so. Now it's very important that we close this ring as tightly as possible. So you really need to give it a good pull so that there isn't even a hint of an opening here between your stitches. There we go. All right, now we are ready. This is now our magic ring and it counts as our first row. We're now ready to start on row 2. Now, normally if you're increasing around or you're making a round shape like this ball, you will increase each row by 6 stitches. So remember, we started with 6, and if for our second row we need to increase by 6, that means we now need 12 stitches at the end. So that means we have to make 2 stitches into each of the stitches from row 1. So if you make 2 single crochets into the same stitch, we call that an increase. So let's do that. Let's make an increase into the first stitch. But before we do that, it's very, very important that you crochet over your yarn tail, because this is what's going to help secure your tail and hold your whole work together. If you don't do this, it is much easier for your project to start unraveling after some time. So that's 1 single crochet, going in back into the first stitch, 2nd single crochet, so that's 1 increase. So now we need to make 5 more. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so if we count those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we now have 12 stitches. All right, so that was how to start with a magic ring using the first method. And like I said, this is one of the most popular ways of making a magic ring for amigurumi projects. I should say though that there are a couple of downsides to this method. One is if you're using a slippery yarn like I am, your work can accidentally start opening up while you're making the 2nd row. For example, here you can see there's quite a big gap already. The other downside is that if you're using very fragile yarn like mohair or lace, your entire magic ring is being held together by a single strand of yarn. And if that yarn were to break, for example, if you have a granny square blanket and your magic ring becomes undone, that will just really destroy an entire square. For that reason, there is a 2nd method for making a magic ring that is slightly more secure. To start with, you are going to wrap your yarn here over from the front to the back of your hand over your index finger. Then we bring the yarn back around underneath and we're going to wrap it over these 2 fingers twice. So once, twice, and then we take the yarn tail as well as the leading yarn and we pinch it between the thumb and the pinky. Now we take the hook and insert it underneath both strands, grab our leading yarn and pull it through, grab our yarn again and pull through the single loop to make a chain. Now, as you can tell, this is very similar to the first method. The main difference is that we're working over 2 strands of yarn instead of 1. So we have now 1 chain. This does not count as a stitch, so we need to make 6 single crochets into this ring. So grab the yarn again, pull through both loops. So 1 single crochet, 2, 3, 4, 5, and as you can see, I always keep the hook on top of my middle finger here. Otherwise, if you don't move it along as you work, you might end up here, and then it's really uncomfortable to try and make a stitch. So that was 5. We need a 6th. There we go. All right. Now we're ready to close the ring. One thing I found when I was starting out and I was quite vigorous in pulling the ring closed is that sometimes I would put too much pressure on the starting stitch and it would become rather tight, which would make it very difficult to start working the next row. So what I like to do, this is just my own little trick, is to insert the hook through this starting stitch just to keep it open. All right, now to pull close, this is a bit more complicated than the first method. First, just flip your tail out of the way, and you'll see now we have two loops or two rings. One of them, if you pull on it, will stop closing the other one. There we go. So see, if we pull on this one, the other one is pulled tight. So there we go. And now to close the second one, we pull on the tail. All right. Now this is because there's now two strands of yarn here in the ring. It stays together much better, if you're working with slippery yarn, and it's also more secure. So then, as in the first method, we're now ready to start with the second row. So we insert our hook back into the loop, and then we do an increase into the first stitch. Now, I always prefer to work over my tail. It's just neater, it gets it out of the way, and it secures it at the same time. So that's one increase. A second increase. Third one, and so forth. Now I've now shown you how to make a magic ring using two different methods. The first method using only a single yarn loop, and the second method using two. And as you can see, they both look exactly the same in your finished work. One is just slightly more secure than the other.